You're listening to Why We Do What We Do. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your broccoli host, Abraham.
And I am your Satan host, Shane. Hail Satan.
Ooh, good one. Yeah. We are a psychology podcast. We talk about what people do and why they do the things that they do. And that's why we titled our podcast, Why We Do What We Do, in fact.
Yeah. And today we are going to talk about veganism, which is the thing that is near and dear to both of our hearts. And something that, surprisingly, I've spent a lot of time around. Actually, the majority of my life I've spent around veganism, which I realized just now as I was speaking the sentence out loud. So that's a weird thing to think about.
I definitely did not. Quite the opposite, in fact. If you are still with us, thank you for being here. We said the words veganism and lost some people potentially, but you're here, so thank you for joining us.
All of our folks in Texas are just done.
That's right. Possibly Florida.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're here. Thank you for being here. And we're going to be talking about that. Yes, there's a thing that people do, and that's why we talk about it. But if you'd like to support the show, if you like what you hear today, you should like and subscribe, leave a rating and review, buy some merch, join us on Patreon. You can start a new diet that does not eat animals and call it Why We Do What We Do, or Why We Do What We Don't Do diet.
Could be Why We Chew What We Chew.
There you go. I missed the low-hanging fruit on that. Anyway, I'll talk more about the ways you can support us at the end of this discussion. But if you're listening to this on the day in which it releases, this is September 6th, 2023. And I would just like to acknowledge Happy National Read a Book Day.
Yes, which should be every day, but it's a good start. It's also National Fight Procrastination Day, so if you are worried about starting a book, maybe today's the do it.
Great.
Celebrate both days.
It's Great Egg Toss Day.
Whatever that.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Which also doesn't align very well with the topic today. It's National Coffee Ice Cream Day, which, big fan.
Yes. Not that hard to make vegan. It's Janmashtami Day.
Yes.
And this one you were able to give an explanation for, Shane.
So this is a celebration of life for Krishna, an Indian holiday.
Yeah. So for our Indian listeners, we see you.
Yeah.
It is National Colorblind Awareness Day.
Which is good. I love seeing those videos of people getting those glasses that help see colors, like for folks that are like severely colorblind, and they get to see those specific glasses that help with that. It's super cool. I had a boss one time that was profoundly colorblind, and what he would do is whenever he would pick out outfits at stores, he would always just grab whatever was on a mannequin. He would say, I'll take that in these sizes. And so he would match them up that way. And so he wouldn't have to ask for help. He'd just be like, I want that outfit, whatever that is.
Yeah. I have known someone also who had pretty extensive colorblindness. I'm really curious how those glasses work. And I think we've been talking about doing color blindness for a while. So maybe we need to do just an episode about color blindness and the glasses that exist for that.
Yeah, for sure. If you're celebrating in September, the months that we're looking at are National Guide Dog Months, which is, all dogs are good dogs, but, guide dogs are something special.
It is Whole Grains Month, which does align with our topic today and does not align with the opposite of our topic today.
That's true. It's also National Square Dancing Month, which does not align with our topic today.
Doesn't not align, though.
Yeah, I can't imagine a lot of vegan square dancers, but if you're a vegan square dancer, please email us.
You make a fair point, but people are complex. It is Leukemia and Lymphoma Awareness Month. So now you know there's leukemia and lymphoma, and it's bad.
Yep, it's real bad. It's also read a new book month. So, like, if you can't start today, starts this month.
Yeah, a new one specifically.
A new one. Yeah.
And finally, National Suicide Prevention Month. Again, should be every month, but acknowledging that is the current month.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. As we said, we are talking about veganism, and stay with us. Where, although we both have a special connection to veganism, which is that we both practice a vegan diet.
Yeah,
we'll have things to say about that. This is going to be a lot more history and psychology than it is preaching. Not no preaching, but mostly the science part.
Yeah, we're just going to give you some information on this. So today, we're going to discover what the Pythagoras Theorem, Billie Eilish, and professional wrestling all have in common.
Sweet. Can't wait. I can't wait to find out.
So good.
All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do it. So veganism is a philosophy and a lifestyle that means the participant does not eat or use any products that are derived from animals. Someone who adheres to a vegan lifestyle usually makes intentional attempts to avoid any animal products, not just food. Now, I want to be clear about this. One of the things that's really important about this is it's attempts. It's not completely refrains, but it is attempts, because vegans mess up All the time. We mess up all the time.
All the time.
But that is an important part of this. They make an attempt to not consume any animal products, not just food.
Surprisingly difficult to avoid too. Like, you can find specialty places where you can get non-leather belts, shoes that contain no leather materials. They're out there, but you do have to look. So it's like, and sometimes they're not out there. Sometimes the only option is this thing that has some amount of leather in it. And it is just is what it is, you know?
Yeah.
You kind of get stuck with. And so, but that's an example. Leather is maybe one people might not always think about. There are, oh man, all the different dairies. That's food stuff, obviously, but just a lot of things I think a lot of people wouldn't even think of necessarily as being things that one would typically avoid. One actually that occurred to me just now is a lot of times you will see vegans not going to zoos or other amusement parks that have animal exhibits specifically.
Yeah.
Circus, another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting kind of like things to unpack within that. We're going to talk about all that though.
Yeah. So you could actually, this isn't in the notes, not what we were planning to talk about, but you could think of the move toward veganism that is not just around food as being a financial one. It is sort of a economic boycott of industries that use animals.
Yeah.
That's sort of a way of thinking about how it works. But veganism includes a few other important elements. As we said, dietary is one of them. And so any food consumed by vegan is free of animal products to the extent possible. And these are considered dietary vegans. And
yeah,
do you get into exactly what those are? Because I think some people don't always know.
It was hard to unpack this one a little bit only because like basically it just means all the food that you're eating does not have any animal products, no dairy, no milk, no cheese, you know, all like no eggs, nothing like that. But also like random byproducts of animals as well. So like some Parmesan cheeses are not considered vegan, not just by like the fact that they're vegan, but some of them aren't even vegetarian because of how they're produced and like some of the meat products that are put into them. That includes, in some cases, there's the debate about honey, which we're going to talk about later. That is one that comes up quite often. So yeah, so basically any food item that you consume doesn't have any sort of animal byproduct within it.
Yeah, again, to the extent possible.
Yes.
Because we don't know is no.
Exactly. There's also ethical vegans, which means that any product like clothing, food, medicine are not consumed by the person. And these folks are considered ethical vegans because they avoid using it because of the harm that it causes the animal. So like let's use the example of like different maybe shampoos. There are shampoos that are tested on animals where they might rub the shampoo in the animal's eyes to see how it stings or irritates eyeballs and stuff like that. And which is, again, it's just horrible. And we're not going to get into all of the horrors that goes on with animal testing and all that. But ethical vegans tend to avoid all products that have any sort of animal testing because of the harm that it causes the animal itself.
Right, exactly. That was actually a good example because I think a lot of people here are like, well, what's so wrong about testing shampoo on animals? I'm like, the way they test it is what's wrong.
The way they test it, yeah. They're not washing a rabbit's hair. They're dripping it in their eyeballs.
Yeah, I mean, you could go volunteer to get tested on and see if it's as safe and happy as it sounds like it would be.
Yeah. How do you think they know there's no tears?
Right, yeah. So anyway, you're right. And many of those products are labeled specifically. It'll say vegan or not tested on animals or something of that nature so that people can make that choice.
Yeah.
And then finally, there is environmental veganism. This holds the same standard as dietary and ethical vegans, but the primary motivation is related to how damaging industrial farming is in causing irreversible damage and other industries that essentially depend on animals as a part of manufacturing in some capacity.
Yes. So we've got these three different types. A lot of times, and maybe this is a good time to kind of unpack our personal experiences with this.
Sure.
Let me start by saying this. I'm not entirely vegan. I try to adhere to a vegan diet as much as I can, but I miss the mark all over the place. I'm not like as good about that as I can be. Most of that is a dietary. But I do try to avoid harmful products, and I do try to avoid products if I can. And so I started as an ethical vegan because of the harm that came to animals, and an ethical vegetarian from the harm that came to animals, and then moved into more dietary focuses because that seemed to be the easiest place to kind of to change my behavior. So that's kind of where I started. It started with an ethical kind of moral compass, and then turned into more of a dietary approach to it. Some of the other stuff kind of came in like, oh, I'm glad I'm having this impact. There's like really cool side effects as a result.
The experience I had, and the experience I've heard from others, the experience I had was that I learned about the environmental impacts first. And the environment was much more of a concern to me. It's hard to say this without sounding like a horrible, terrible person. I really did not consider or think that the impacts of the animal industry on animals mattered very much.
Right.
And I don't remember exactly my justification for this, but I remember thinking, I love meat. I love dairy. I love the way these things taste. I love them in my foods. I want to try every cuisine on the planet and every type of food. And I saw that as being like a necessary part of that. It means that animals die so that they end up as my food.
Right.
The environment very much has concerned me for a long time. And so then when I learned about the impact, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but the whole idea of like, well, just don't eat meat one day a week.
Right.
That was pretty easy.
Right.
And to make a long story short, that eventually evolved into a vegetarian diet and then into a more restrictive vegan diet. So as I said, I started at the position of simply the environmental impact. But once I was already adhering to that lifestyle, then all of the sudden, all of the other parts of it just started to make more sense to me. Then it was like, now I started to actually feel compassion toward animals. Now I started being concerned about the dietary part in terms of health. And so I started eschewing some of those animal products that I found in other things, like not wearing leather, like not using honey, like not consuming things that were like filtered through animal bones, not eating like gelatin is one a lot of people don't know about.
Right.
And so those were sort of the reasons. And I've heard that from a lot of people, like they'll come in it from one direction and end up sort of picking up all the others as reasons for themselves.
Yeah.
It's fairly common.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I started cutting out, and we'll talk about the different levels of this too. I started cutting out red meat, and then I started cutting out chicken, and I was only a pescatarian for a little bit, which like I said, we'll unpack that term. And then that's when the ethical stuff hit in. I did it for health reasons first, and then the ethical stuff hit in, and that's when I was like, okay, no meat at all, nothing with a face, and then started kind of like shaping up my behavior around like more vegan products and more plant-based products after that. So that's kind of how I started. I had to like fade in this diet for me.
Yeah. And, I think as I was saying, like I also faded in, but it was like one day a week was so easy. It was so easy, even for someone who like, I always like to joke that the meat industry took a pretty huge hit when I became vegetarian because like my baseline was way above your average. It was like, I would like meat with a side of meat on top of meat wrapped inside of meat, please.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so when I changed directions, it was like I died as far as the meat industry was concerned. A regular staple customer just suddenly vanished into thin air.
Yeah, there's a blip on the map. They're like, a whole family disappeared. Nope.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Yep, just the one. Anyway, point being, I think that it was a pretty dramatic shift for me, but even with that diet or with just one day a week, it was really easy.
Yeah.
It was really easy.
Yeah.
I barely had to think about it or work on it at all. I would just choose things that didn't have meat in them. And this was at a time when the options for alternatives were scarce to non-existent.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think people realize that it's much easier to be vegan vegetarian now than it has ever been.
Yeah. Like when I started, the best you could get most places was a tofu sandwich. That was like a slab of tofu on bread. Like that was your alternative. Otherwise, it was just like, you make your own food. There was a lot of it. Or you'd go to like salad places and just tell them like, don't put the chicken on. What I mean by don't is don't. What I mean by don't, as in don't, is leave it in the container instead of putting it on the salad.
Yeah. I don't want it anywhere near it.
It was hard to explain. Yeah. It took some explanation.
Yeah.
To get there. But anyway, I found it extremely easy to just not eat meat one day a week. And so after a while, I just doubled that. And then I just continued to increase it from there. So that was the fading process for me.
Yeah. There you go. It works. So with that being said, it's probably worth unpacking the terms vegetarian and vegan and where it all comes from. But first, some plant-based ads.
All right, Shane teed us up for talking about vegan and vegetarian because it may surprise you or not to know that these terms have not been around forever. I mean, really not very long at all.
Yeah, so the term vegetarian has been used more regularly since about 1839. So it's only since 1839 this word existed. Just like the word creep. Yeah. The word creep is a fairly new term thanks to Charles Dickens.
Because he was a creep?
He was a creep.
Oh.
I almost went so far as to say, like, the word creep was invented by TLC, but, it was not. So the term was primarily used to refer to a primarily vegetable diet. It's one of those words that was made up, like all words, but it came from an irregular combination of vegetable and Aryan, Arian, not the bad Aryan, which means to support or believe. So vegetarian is a combination of vegetable and the suffix Aryan.
Right. So basically to believe in a vegetable diet is kind of how you might loosely translate that.
Yeah, exactly.
The term was attributed to Fanny Kemble in a book titled Journal of a Residence on a Georgian Plantation in 1838 to 1839. That rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, it's just like as good as like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, and we're still talking about vegetarian right now.
Yes.
Some quick notes on Kemble. She was a British actress and abolitionist whose work was primarily derived from her personal journals. She would often document conditions of enslaved people and would go to advocate for the abolition of slavery. See our recent episodes on slavery that immediately precede this one.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting tie-in. However, there is a bit of controversy in her writings for various reasons. Some people argue that Kemble falsified her account of plantation owner Roswell King Jr. after her affections were dismissed. So apparently she had come on to Roswell King Jr. and he said, no, I'm not interested. And she's like, I'm going to get you by recording an accurate historical account of what you did to people. And the accounting was directly criticized by King's granddaughter. But guy was a plantation owner, so probably wasn't really great.
Yeah, not known for their honesty about conditions on the plantation.
Yeah, and it sounds like King's granddaughter probably has a vested interest in making sure that the legacy is not tarnished.
Exactly. Okay, so as we said, vegetarian is a recent term. Despite that, however, vegetarianism, the practice of actually eating a primarily fruit and vegetable based diet, has existed for a millennia. It just didn't need to be known by any particular title.
Right.
The earliest accounting for vegetarianism goes back at least as far as 3300 BCE in the Indus Valley Civilization. Located in South Asia in what we now know as Eastern Pakistan and Northwestern India, this civilization was notable for their urban planning, elaborate drainage system, water supply systems, and metallurgy, and apparently practiced widely a vegetarian type diet.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, as far as the term vegan goes, the phrase wasn't coined until about 1944 in a publication called The Vegan News, which is so great.
That's great.
So much stuff going on in the world, and they put together a vegan news bulletin. I think that's fantastic.
Right.
The members of the Vegetarian Society, by the way, I realize even as a vegan and vegetarian, I don't think that I would be able to hang out with these people. They sound insufferable.
Yeah.
They do not sound like they're fun. But members of the Vegetarian Society wanted to develop a newsletter that accounted for people who were solely devoted to non-dairy vegetarianism.
Right. And as we said, vegetarianism largely, I guess we haven't really unpacked this super well, but vegetarianism really just was not eating specifically the flesh of animals.
Right.
Although in practice, we'll talk about not eating the flesh of animals coincided with also not eating products from animals.
Right.
And those often weren't readily available anyway. And I think arguably throughout history, this isn't really something we're talking about inside of this. It'd be fun, I think, anthropological sort of episode to do to talk about human diets as they've evolved over time.
Sure.
But meat has almost never been a central part of any diet throughout history until industrialization began, because meat was extremely difficult to procure in large enough quantities that it could be a major part of people's diets. So most people throughout history primarily ate vegetables and fruits and grains as they were available. I've seen these stickers that people have on the bumper of their car that says eat beef, the West wasn't one on salad. I'm like, yeah, it kind of was, actually.
It was. It was one on trail mix.
Yeah. What they had to eat was they would certainly eat game if they could hunt it and catch it, but they had to depend as a primary staple of their food, a lot of grains and a lot of fruits and vegetables when they could get their hands on them. You just can't have that substantial amount of your diet come from meat when you're in a society that is not as very well industrialized, because humans are slow. We do not have very many predator features that most other predators have, and we can't outrun our food very well. We have to trap it. We have to catch it. We have to hunt it if it's gonna be animals. Otherwise, you can forage it, which we're very good at, and you can grow it, which it turns out we also became very good at.
Right.
So anyway, point being, most places around the world were sort of foundationally practicing a much higher level of vegetarianism just because that was all that they could do, and not necessarily ideologically, although some of them were somewhat ideological.
Right. And we're going to unpack some of that too as we go. We're going to unpack and talk about just the fact that in a lot of places, the availability of meat for those communities is kind of like a reward. Or it's a special treat. It's not something that's like a staple. It's not like a 3-course meal type of situation that we have here in the United States where it's like meat and potatoes for every meal. It's not like that.
Right. Oh, I just need to say really quick, because I was saying the West won on salad. The idea of the West being one is extremely insulting.
Yeah.
The West was stolen and appropriated from indigenous people by committing horrible acts of atrocity and genocide. Let's not pretend that it was one in any way.
The West was previously maintained by a largely vegetarian diet with a scattering of meats here and there.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yep, you're right. Okay.
So let's talk about Donald Watson. So Donald Watson, who proposed the idea of the vegan-specific newsletter, was told that this was not going to happen by the Vegetarian Society. So he went off and he started his own newsletter called The Vegan News. The term was invented by Watson and a school teacher named Dorothy Morgan. They would later marry. Like the two of them would end up getting married. So that the husband and wife came up with the term vegan.
And to do this, they coined this term through this incredibly painstaking process that included lots of trial and error of different ways to distinguish veganism from vegetarianism that did include eggs and dairy and that sort of thing. What they did is they took the beginning and end parts of vegetarian, veg, and N, and made a new word. That was all. That was all they had to do. It just became vegan because the general rule is a G followed by an A is a hard G sound. So vegan.
Yeah. Painstaking. So tough. So difficult. I will say they did come up with some alternatives that I'm so glad that we didn't stick with. So we're going to go over what we could be, but we are not. So we could have been all vega or all vega.
We could be neo-vegetarian.
Ugh. We could be dairy bon.
It's not great.
Nope.
Vitan, I guess.
Yeah. We could be a benivore.
Ew. That sounds like a medicine you would put on like sores on your butt or something.
It sounds like it would be on I Love Lucy. It sounds like it'd be the partner to Vita Meta Vegemin.
There you go. And we could also be sanivores.
Ugh. Or we could be Beaumangure.
None of those work super well.
None of those work at all. So I'm glad they landed on vegan.
Yeah. The Vegan News and eventually the Vegan Society would go on to publish trade lists and books that included things like vegan recipes and children's books related to veganism. I think probably largely related to the idea of thinking of animals as being sentient, autonomous beings that should be treated with respect and dignity.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that it's really clear. This is right around the end of World War II. So this is not like an old practice, but it's also just such a specific time frame. There's so many things going on that it feels like I'm surprised that this became such an important part of that, like kind of rebuilding society type of situation, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like it's like,
oh yeah,
it's like such a strange little corner of like World War II era America.
Yeah, I agree. It is kind of odd that was on their mind at the time, but
hey,
I guess people had to do something other than think about the war.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 1947, this group made a call for a ban on all animal products, not just dietary restrictions. And in 1951, they published their first definition of the term vegan. So they were already kind of getting into the vegan activism. And this is kind of maybe where PETA maybe started and then totally like ran off with it, saying that meat causes autism now.
Good Lord.
So don't listen to PETA. They're a little bit ridiculous. But this is kind of where it starts. And in 1951, we finally get a definition of this.
Yeah, I'll say just as a quick side note on PETA, that part of my anti-vegetarian stance early on in life was seeing the absolute crap that was put out by PETA.
Yeah.
And so I have never been a member of the organization.
Me neither.
And I think they have almost always been extremely counterproductive in their methods.
Right.
And so just as a quick note on there.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of famous vegetarians throughout history. There is Seneca the Younger, Nikola Tesla, Dame Jane Goodall, Coretta Scott King, Sir Paul McCartney, Leo Tolstoy, Serena Williams, Leonardo da Vinci, Pythagoras, Rosa Parks, Albert Einstein, and Billie Eilish, to name a few. That does tie in at least a couple of our threads from the beginning.
Yes.
Some people are sitting here listening, and I know what you're thinking. Yes, Hitler was also vegetarian. And he presumably was even a vegetarian for ethical animal reasons, which just goes to show like that people are complex, I think, and that just because you maybe make one choice in the right direction, what we would maybe consider the right direction, doesn't mean that you are a morally good person through and through.
Right, exactly. It's probably more likely that he did it I could see him doing it for dietary reasons, or making a decision while he was like all kinds of hopped up on speed.
Well, he apparently suffered from horrible flatulence. And
so a vegan diet would be better for him? Like, oh my God, the guy, he does not need to eat more broccoli.
I think presumably he thought that a vegetarian, he wasn't vegan, but I think presumably he thought a vegetarian diet would help with the flatulence as well. That I think is a little unclear, but he definitely expressed some amount of sentiment for animal welfare in some ways.
Ironic.
Obviously not human welfare.
Yeah. Still really bad, dude.
Yeah. Basically the archetype for evil in the world, if you were to believe such a thing exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Didn't think he was going to make an appearance in this episode. Did not plan for that, so...
Sorry.
No, you're good. It's important.
I figured somebody was thinking it. We may as well say it.
That is the argument that comes up a lot. So I think it's probably worth unpacking the different types of vegetarianism and veganism because, as we said before, the Vegan News in 1951 came up with a definition of what vegan is. But today, because we like to label things and we like to have different, it's like subgenres of veganism and vegetarianism. Yeah. And so we're going to maybe unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, the taxonomizing of things, what Stephen Jay Gould would call extreme splitters.
Yep. Humans love it. Humans love it.
Yep. So earlier, as we said, we referenced there's sort of, if you think of the motives, there's the sort of dietary, ethical, environmental veganism as sort of subtypes. But there are these other branches and dietary subsets of this lifestyle that we figure may as well discuss briefly.
Yeah, so there's lacto-vegetarians, which excludes meat and eggs and foods that contain them. But there's dairy-based products within that. So a lacto-vegetarian doesn't eat eggs or meat, but they will eat cheese or maybe drink milk.
Yes. The ovo-vegetarian excludes meat and those dairy things, yogurt, cheeses, milks, that sort of thing, but they do allow eggs.
Right. And then a lacto-ovo-vegetarian will exclude meat, but allow dairy and eggs. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now as the lacto-ovo or lacto-avo-vegetarian.
Got it. A pescatarian excludes all meat, dairy, and eggs, but does eat fish. And actually, I think this one's a little bit flexible too, because I've seen a lot of pescatarians who basically just don't eat meat from land animals and will eat basically anything. They'll still eat dairy, they'll still eat eggs.
Right.
And they'll still eat fish, but they just won't eat like cows, chickens, pigs, that sort of thing.
That's what I did for a long time. It was like no land animals, but it was like sea creatures were fair game. So,
Right.
But I did kind of like what you said before, where it was like, it was like, oh, I'm gonna deplete the sea apparently because I wanted to eat all of it and try all the things. So I would eat every sea creature.
Sure.
So there's a real problem. There's also flexitarianism, which is primarily a plant-based diet, but has the flexibility to include animal products in moderation. And this might be due to specific health considerations or dietary needs. It's not necessarily that the person is got a moral high ground about it. It might actually just be that they've got something that they can't supplement outside of those things. So that's where the flexitarianism is. So the majority of their day, the majority of their diet is plant-based, but they have to include some other things here and there.
And then, as we said, vegan excludes all animal products. No meat, no eggs, no dairy, no honey, no gelatin, no bones, no blood, no animals whatsoever.
That's kind of the breakdown of all the things. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other ones in there, but those are the main ones that I found as we were doing the research.
That's fair. Well, I tell you what, whenever someone finds out that you're a vegetarian, and especially when they find out that you're vegan, the first question we get is, how do you get enough protein? These ads will tell you, and then we'll tell you the truth.
Nice.
Okay, we're back answering the question about where do vegans get their protein? They're all dying and wasting away before our very eyes.
Yeah, so welcome to the myth-busting portion of this. And this is my favorite thing because everybody, first of all, for those of you who see me, I do not look like I'm wasting away because all I'm eating is a salad. So I get plenty of food and there's plenty of protein in my diet. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
But come down this path with us. We're going to debunk the hell out of a lot of public misconceptions about veganism and vegetarianism. And the first is that eating vegan is expensive. No, it's not. So the parts that are expensive are the dairy and meat substitutes. Those are things that tend to be kind of at a premium price.
Right.
But even then, they're not really that terrible, but they aren't necessary for a vegan diet. And I think that's the really important thing. You don't need to have a Beyond Burger to be a vegan.
Right.
As a matter of fact, naturally vegan foods tend to be cheaper overall. Grains, rice, fruits, seeds, nuts, beans are all naturally vegan and can be purchased at a much lower price point than you would think.
Yeah, it's kind of like anything. You can eat a carnivore-ish diet and spend millions of dollars if you want to, having the rarest steaks and whatever, or specific types of meats, or you can eat flexibly on a budget. And the same is true for a vegan diet. You can spend a lot of money if you want to, but you certainly don't have to be able to follow the diet.
Right.
Another one, the honey is vegan. Honey is not vegan. This is a unique debate. Honey is produced by bees, so we don't like squeeze honey out of them or anything. But some argue that since bees often produce more than they consume, they aren't forced to produce, such as cows with milk, and therefore it's fine. Others argue that collecting honey is exploitative and harmful. It is an interesting debate. And I think the where to go with that is that there are cases where bees will produce more than they need to. What people maybe don't know is honey is bees' food. They basically make that, they regurgitate it out of themselves, and then they use it later for a source of calories.
Right.
They have this process where they farm things like pollen. They go to plants, they collect it, they consume it, it gets processed in their body to be regurgitated out, so it becomes a digestible source of calories for them, their primary source of calories, in fact. And so the way that a lot of honey is farmed is that people will take the honey, they'll have these bees kept in these boxes where they can easily take the honey out, and then they replace it with sugar water because that also has calories. It also has sugar, which is what the bees have.
Right.
Terrible for the bees. Absolutely terrible. And so the bees often will experience colony collapse because of this. They might also die in the process simply of going through. They often will smoke. They'll blow smoke at the bees to keep them calm so they're not attacking the apiarists as they're doing their thing. But there are also people who argue that they can do this very ethically and very responsibly. And I don't doubt that that's certainly possible. But I think for a lot of people, the safe route is just don't eat honey.
Right.
Because you don't know how it's being produced.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah. And agave nectar is a perfectly acceptable replacement as far as like, if you're trying to get that feeling like that works just fine. Okay. So one thing I've heard, and I hear this all the time, is plants have feelings. Well, no, they don't. There are some interesting studies that talk about I don't want to say trauma responses, but like basically if there's like damage responses, like if there's damage to the structure of the plant, there are certain things that happen as a response, like almost like cellular like reproduction and all that stuff. But plants don't have central nervous systems. They don't have brains. They are complex. They are interesting, but they do not have what we would describe as feelings. And so that's kind of one of those things that there's a lot of really interesting science. And if you're a botanist and you want to talk about this, please email us as well. I'd love to hear from you all.
Yeah.
Friend Brendan, who loves plants, please tell us some stuff too. But at the end of the day, plants do not have feelings the way that we think they do.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a silly argument. And then I think if you go back to the motive of like environmental impact, like honestly, if I could eat nothing and be perfectly healthy and survive and just absorb sunlight for energy, I would totally do that because it would be even less exploitative on the world. It would free up a lot of space and time that we spend hauling stuff out of our planet that would be better spent helping our planet thrive and be successful. But I can't do that, so I got to eat something.
Right.
The thing that I can eat that is the closest to the sort of lowest level of the trophic food chain, if you will, is plants. And there was a recent study about hearing plants scream. It was literally what it sounds like when the fibers in plants break. You want to call that screaming? Right. Like, come on.
Right.
That's like saying that rocks scream when you break them apart because they make a sound when you break them.
Right.
Like,
right.
Never even had anything to do with anything lifelike.
Now, if you start slicing a carrot and it goes, ow, 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 then that's a different conversation.
Yeah, then stop.
Yeah.
It's a very silly argument from people who are, I think, disingenuously trying to engage.
Right. Yeah, it's bad faith actors. Like they're just like they're not trying to have a debate or an argument with you. They're literally just trying to like troll you.
Yeah, it's just trolling. We should do an episode on trolling sometime. I think we've mentioned that before.
Yes.
All right, myth number 4, vegans can't get enough calcium or protein. This one is so false that it hurts. Check this out. First, vegans get more than enough calcium from things like kale, spinach, tahini, dried figs, almonds, soybeans, chickpeas, and seaweed. There's calcium in a lot of plants. It's more readily available than in other places. Furthermore, as far as protein goes, broccoli, spinach, tofu, lentils, chickpeas, amaranth, nutritional yeast, soy milk, and green peas are just a few of the plant-based foods that provide a substantial amount of protein. Beans can actually give you more protein than a cut of steak and have less fatty byproducts. All of the things that we need are available from plants as humans specifically. It's not true for cats, but it is for humans.
Right. Myth number 5, vegan diets are not healthy. Now, here's the thing about this. If it's done wrong, sure, just like any other diet. And this is really important. If you're not getting all of the nutrients you need, then yeah, that whatever you're doing is a problem. it's not inherently that the vegan part of it is bad. A good vegan diet is actually very lean, very healthy. You almost have like zero issues with cholesterol and all the things that go along with that. So it's not that vegan diets are unhealthy. It's that people implement them in unhealthy ways. As a matter of fact, some of the most unhealthy people I know are vegans because they choose in their diet to eat nothing but buttered pasta, like with margarine or oil.
Yeah.
Or French fries all the time.
And Oreos.
Or Oreos, because Oreos are vegan. And so I've seen some of the most unhealthy people in my life are vegan because they're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So they're not inherently one way or another, but I think if you were focusing primarily on eating vegetables, then you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Right.
All right. Vegan diets make you weak. This is a professional wrestling tie-in. Professional wrestler Bryan Danielson, former Daniel Bryan in WWE, is a staunch vegan, has been for decades. He's in incredible shape. He even replaced the WWE title with a vegan-friendly version made of recycled materials for a little bit and would slap hot dogs out of people's hands during the show, I guess. It's fine. Carl Lewis, famous Olympic track star who set world records, also vegan. So yes, there is no reason to think that you can't be very strong and also be vegan. There are many people who are actually bodybuilders who are specifically vegan and have written books about how they sort of work around, they use their diets to support the lifestyle of bodybuilding.
Yeah. Bryan Danielson is a great example of this. I always think it's really funny. And it's always funny too, like in professional wrestling, when they make something that's like a quote unquote counterculture to what they think professional wrestling is, they make them the villain. So like his character was trying to save the world by recycling more and trying to reverse global warming, but he was the villain. So that's why he would slap hot dogs out of people's hands, because they were like, you can't eat that, it's disgusting. Like, you're destroying the environment. And like the environmentalist was the villain, which is so silly.
Sure.
But the reason he had a recycled belt is because the championship belt is a leather strap. And he's like, nah, we're not doing this. And so he threw it away and had like a hemp strap with like wood plates on it and stuff. It was great.
It's hilarious. Love it.
Myth number 7, vegans just eat salad. Well, according to most restaurants we found on Yelp, yes, that's true. Those are the vegan options that every restaurant has when they list themselves as vegan.
Right.
But those people are silly gooses. Vegans eat so much more than that. And as a matter of fact, some of the best vegan food I've ever had is not a salad. Even like at home, some of the food that I make, like my son, like the one thing that he loves to eat is the vegan pizza that we make.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Vegan pizza is not that hard, actually. Even if you weren't using alternatives, you simply leave off the cheese and you've got a really good pizza.
Yeah. Or you get like vegan shreds if you want that texture, and that's fine too. Like it all works.
Yeah. I actually love like going to a sandwich place where you sort of build your own, and I always like all the vegetables.
Yeah.
That's all. And like, you'd be amazed at how good that tastes. Like it's great.
It works.
Yeah. Put all the vegetables on there. I personally am a fan of the jalapenos. Avocado gives it some nice creaminess. I like mustard on mine. I'm a fan of the wheat bread. Then you've got a very well-rounded sandwich.
Exactly.
All right, myth 8. Veganism is hard. I mean, sure, it can be. But how is that different from changing any other habit in your life? Consider a time you tried going on a specific diet. You think back to like Atkins or something like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to stick to, right? Habit changes can be tough for a variety of reasons. Being vegan isn't really any harder than anything else. I'd argue easier than something like picking up a workout routine.
Right.
Particularly because it becomes a lifestyle. You stop thinking about it most of the time. It just becomes something you do.
Right. Exactly. And the last myth that we're going to debunk, vegans must miss meat or dairy. Not really. There are people that might, but if you are somebody who is eating vegan or vegetarian and you have like flavorful cooking, like you know how to like cook a meal, you're usually fine with it. Like I've been in the vegetarian realm for 8 years now, and I don't crave or miss any of the things that I used to eat. Like there's never a time where I'm driving by a Wendy's going, "Oh man, you know what I could really go for is a spicy chicken sandwich." I don't think like that. I'm just kind of like, "No, I want something spicy. I'll go make something spicy at home and get that." Like I'm not missing the meat part of it. I'm missing the flavor part of it. So just flavor your food. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. And the hardest thing when I first started following a vegan diet was cheese, because I ate a lot of animal products. And that was the toughest one for me. But once I was sort of over it, I was completely over it. And I literally have not wanted it ever since. And actually, the times when I've accidentally had milk because someone made like a latte with regular milk when I asked for something else or whatever, you can tell pretty quickly because it has this weird off sort of sour taste that I find really unpleasant now.
Yeah. We're not trying to convert y'all but like we just want to give you information. But somebody the other day said that they had a glass of like 2% milk and said it smelled like boogers. And that made me laugh really loud. Like I was like, that was very funny. But also, yeah, I can't drink milk anymore.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I don't really just drink glasses of oat milk either.
Right.
That's just not a thing. But anyway, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we call our show Why We Do What We Do. And so we should talk about why people are vegan or vegetarian. We've sort of shared our story, but there's more to unpack there. So we'll listen to some ads, sell you some, I don't know, Impossible Burgers maybe, and we'll come right back. Okay, so why do people do this, Shane?
Yeah, why? There's lots of reasons. You know, we kind of shared our personal reasons and stuff, but there are, for some folks, a lot of health benefits. Just, I mentioned before, like eating a vegan vegetarian diet can help, more specifically, a vegan diet can help reduce issues with cholesterol. There's a lot of things like that. There's also health concerns about animal protein, and there's also animal welfare and moral values. All of those things are different reasons for why somebody might do it. And every person that you meet that's vegan or vegetarian is going to have their own personal kind of journey towards it. So their own reasons for it. And like I said, we've shared our own, but there are lots of reasons why.
One of the things that immediately got me into it, as I mentioned earlier, was the sort of environmental impacts. And there's a few things that like I learned about this that, again, this is, I think, the preachiest part of all of this. And I think there's some caveats situated in this as well. But some of the things that includes like, okay, the meat industry actually uses a ton of fossil fuel and water and a lot of grain to feed livestock. I've actually heard that I think the majority of the corn grown in the United States goes to feeding livestock when you could use those resources to actually feed people directly, because you don't get a one-to-one conversion. The amount of food you spend to grow an animal does not produce that amount of food and meat from that animal. You need like between 10 and 100 times that much food to grow the same, like a pound of that meat. It takes about 1,700 to 1,800 gallons of water to produce a single pound of beef, compared to an average of 39 gallons of water per pound of vegetables, more or less, depending on what types of vegetables and where you grow them. The vegetarian diet alone could dramatically reduce water consumption by as much as 58% per person. Again, lots of caveats situated there, thinking about where things are grown. Like if you have a salad that was flown into you specifically from like South Africa to the United States, the amount of fossil fuel burned to get it there was not worth it. Like your impact, it was either negligible or even potentially worse. So consider where things are coming from. Things grown in regions that they don't normally grow and require a lot more water and environmental modifications to make them stable. That's hard on the environment. So it's a mix. But if you can get it locally, things that are grown naturally in those areas, or they're shipped as well as could be expected given where they come from, then you can reduce that by quite a bit.
Right. Also, too, meat production itself is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. That specifically, the greenhouse gas emissions has proven to correlate to climate change crisis, like the crisis that we're experiencing right now. That is one of the number one things, if not the thing, that's contributing. So immediately, just eating meat is kind of perpetuating a system that is producing really problematic kind of environmental events. I mean, that's why we're seeing literally, I just got like notifications the other day, a hurricane was hitting Los Angeles at the same time as an earthquake. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's a little bit intense right now.
Yeah. I don't think climate change can account for earthquakes.
No, that's true.
We definitely have seen the intensity of hurricanes increase as the temperature of water increases.
Right.
This goes back to the sort of economic portion of this. You just eating a piece of meat doesn't necessarily do anything to the environment. It's the fact that meat then was raised in a cow on a farm and then shipped to you, right? Like that was, and it's
the combination of
that
things.
went into that. Yeah, it's all the combination of things. When the cow's alive, they fart or burp a whole bunch of methane into the atmosphere to the tune of like billions of metric tons of carbon. So you can reduce your carbon footprint by as much as 8 pounds if you every day that you choose to not consume just meat. Like we're not even talking about dairy and eggs or anything else at this point.
Right.
So one person skipping meat one day a week for a year would be like taking almost 350 miles off of the road of driving a car. And if everybody did this, it'd be like taking 250 million cars off the road every year, as how they've worked out the math. That's probably an extreme estimation, like on the high end of that. And that probably also doesn't factor in things like electric cars and that sort of thing.
Right.
But quick side note, shouldn't we just take 250 million cars off of the road?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, just get rid of them.
Just to reduce traffic.
Yeah, just get rid of them. Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits to eating a plant-based diet just once a week. But, people do this too for religious belief. Like they may find, and we've seen this time and time again, where the cow is a sacred animal, so it is not consumed, it is worshipped, and you'll see this kind of time and time again where vegetarian diets are kind of embedded or entrenched in certain religious practices or spiritual beliefs. And I think that's really important too, when you understand that like it might not even be an ethical reason, it might be a specific moral reason related to a higher power.
Yeah, and there are also some people who's just simply, they don't even want the label. They don't care about feeling like they fit in with a vegan or vegetarian community. They just prefer to not eat a lot of animal products. It's usually meat that they tend to eat very little of.
Right.
But that could also be a reason, is just that personal preference that people have, that they just don't like it, or they just don't want to, they just prefer really prefer vegetables. And it's like, they don't really care about the fact that they're missing out on the meat. They just really, really like their vegetables. That happens for some people.
Right. So with all that being said, that's just kind of general, like understanding individual variables, but we should look at the science part. So what do nerds have to say about vegan and vegetarian diets?
Okay, so earlier we talked about calcium. Smith 2006 found that vegans can struggle with calcium and have a greater risk of osteoporosis than their non-dairy counterparts. However, this lower amount of calcium is not directly related to calcium and or vitamin D deficits as they relate to bone fractures. So vegans don't necessarily have more broken bones, should plan for getting more calcium in their diet.
Right. Gaiman in 2021 discussed the idea that veganism is beginning to emerge as a more popular lifestyle. So it's becoming kind of part of the cultural zeitgeist. And more specifically, they account for cultural origins of veganism and how those are beginning to permeate what we describe or what we think of as cultural norms. So you're finding that other parts of the world, that vegetarianism and veganism has been kind of a staple practice for centuries, is starting to get into places that didn't really have that type of lifestyle for a long time. So now that cultures are starting to meld, you're starting to see more vegetarian experiences.
Yep. Sexton, Garnett, and Lorimer 2022 discussed big veganism and how it's beginning to grow across a variety of geographical reasons. Factors that contribute to big veganism spread included following foodways, alternative food networks, cultural politics, and material politics. So apparently you can get a job as a food geographer as a thing now.
Yeah, so this is something I learned. A food geographer apparently maps out like where rich resources of food and food deserts exist within specific places. For example, like a food geographer in the United States might look at specific areas where like more rural areas, more rural cities where it's hard to get foodstuffs to those places, or like reservations, which are considered in a lot of places are considered food deserts because there are certain resources that can't get out to the reservations, Native American reservations out there. So food geographers look at that and they do data analyses based on food accessibility.
Wow. That's cool. I'm glad that's the thing that exists.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really cool. I thought it was really fascinating. So behaviorally speaking, though, we could spend hours and hours and hours breaking this down because people have interesting relationships with food and food aversions and all this stuff. But I want to look at a few factors that we can account for when we talk about behavior. First is that food as a primary reinforcer means that like we tend to really like food. We're naturally motivated to go eat food.
Yes.
And it's a primary need. So we develop really complex, sometimes detrimental relationships with food. We develop these really unique experiences with food for different reasons. We learn what we like, we learn what we dislike, we learn how to prepare meals. All of these contribute to the types of foods we eat, including whether or not we like certain types of vegan food. Like, oh, you might have a particular experience with tofu. Like maybe you don't like the texture, maybe you don't like that. So you might have a unique relationship with the types of food that are coming up in your area.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that is an account for this is just our general learning histories and the sort of contexts in which we've contacted these foods. We may have been exposed to lots of experiences with foods when we were growing up. For instance, Shane ate so much pasta when he was a kid because it was cheap that he got really sick of it. And he never picks pasta as a go-to food because he's over it.
Yeah, that's true.
Experiences like being forced to eat foods or traditions around foods might create different learning histories that influence our behaviors. My mom, I think, very cleverly told me that I was smart for trying a lot of different foods. And I wanted to be smart. So I was like very open-minded to trying different foods.
Yeah.
And I learned early on that mushrooms were one of my favorite foods and always have been. And the more mushrooms I try, the more I like mushrooms.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I've also I don't recall a time in my life when I did not like a lot of dark leafy greens and other vegetables. Like I've always loved broccoli. I've always loved spinach. I've always loved squash. I've always loved like all of these other vegetables my whole life. So I kind of grew up around a wide palette. But I also grew up around people who were very, very much into meat eating and tried things also like chicken livers and hearts and cow tongue and all sorts of different types of meats, various seafoods and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was just a very, very wide range of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see that. I was raised to try things, but I was also like, we didn't get a lot of opportunity to try things because we just had no money. Like it was pretty much like, okay, so like a cut of steak was London broil. Like it was beat the shit, and it was tough and chewy. You know, it was pasta every night. It was peanut butter and jelly. It was, you know, I lived that life where it was hot dogs wrapped in a piece of white bread. You know, like
wow.
That's the kind of the diet that I grew up with. Not to say that people don't have that worse. People absolutely 100% have that worse. I was very fortunate to have food, but I didn't get a lot of opportunities to try stuff like that. So I didn't do that until later. And then I was like, I'm going to try everything. And then learned I don't like to try everything.
That's fair.
So speaking of that, let's talk about food accessibility and opportunity. So with vegan options becoming more and more accessible and available, it makes sense that veganism would be kind of on the rise. In areas where plant-based options are not quite as available, though, we might find that folks may simply not make the attempt, or they may not know how. And I can speak for this. When I was a kid, we had Morningstar. Morningstar products were the product that everybody ate. That was it.
Yeah.
The options, at least just for like the stuff that's out there that's like specifically plant-based stuff that's like products like the meat substitutes, there's so many things now. All my vegan friends when we were kids like loved it was Boca and Morningstar. Yeah. Those are the two things that everybody was like, yes, we got to get those. And it was kind of like you know, Cobras versus Scorpions. Like it was like two different rival gangs. I had the Boca friends and I had the Morningstar gang. I was a Morningstar kid. I couldn't stand the Boca stuff. Now I eat Boca burgers all the time.
Yeah, I like them both. I think a lot of people who aren't in the sort of vegetarian community, they sort of think that is all that exists still, because they've heard of anything that maybe is what they've heard of. So like if we ever go someplace where someone's like, oh, we made a vegan option, 90% of the time is going to be a portobello cap on a bun.
Yeah.
And the other time, like if it's not that, then it's probably one of those Morningstar patties. And they're good. Like I like them all. I like Boca, I like Morningstar, like they're fine. But there are just so many more options out there. And also like I'm okay just eating vegetables. Like I said, I love vegetables.
Yeah. And also, just so you know, we appreciate the attempt. We're very flattered that you would even try.
We do. Yes. Completely. The fact that you even thought that it was worth trying to help accommodate is very, very kind. So
it's
I don't want to disparage that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one is response effort. This is, I think, just understanding what it takes to engage in some diet like this, learning how to prepare new meals, create new recipes, change dietary practices. It does take effort. This is not like you just flip a switch and everything is like golden. Some people may find that the juice is not worth the squeeze, as they say, when it comes to the amount of work that it can take. And that's not just in preparing meals, but that's also learning how to tell if something that you've bought is vegan. It's learning to tell, like, how do you pick out restaurants? How do you identify ingredients that you need? There's so many things that go, like, what things shouldn't you have anymore? And like all of that takes time. It takes effort. It takes learning. But eventually, like, you get very good at reading labels on packaging.
Yes. Yes, you do.
That's not in everybody's sort of wheelhouse. You know, that's not something that they want to do. They don't want to really think about their food very much. So, and I get that. I think the more we move toward, like, what's really nice now is how many products it'll just have a little stamp that says vegan on it.
Yeah.
And so that you really don't have to try very hard. If it's got that stamp on it, you can accept that and you're good to move on.
Sure.
I think for some people, if they wanted to try it, but they didn't want to do the effort, you could just sort of ask, say, is that vegan? The waiter will say, I don't know. And you're like, yeah, whatever. But sometimes they'll say, oh, it's not, but we can make it vegan if you want to. And so I think there's things that are moving toward making it less effortful.
Yeah, I think another part of that too is like if you are somebody, and this is just kind of like a little tidbit, if you're somebody who's interested in becoming vegan or vegetarian, just know that you're probably going to mess up. And it's okay. Give yourself some grace. Like I've seen people give up on vegan diets because they mess up once or twice and they're like, well, that's it. It's like, no, I still like will mess up here and there. Like not too long ago, like I like I said, I try to be really cognizant of like what I eat. And not too long ago, I got a bag of like pizza combos and they have like a beef broth in it or something like that. And I didn't know, I missed it when I looked at the ingredients and I saw it. And once I saw it, I was like, oh, I'm not going to eat the rest of these. But it was, I'd already messed up, you know, or like some soups will have like a broth that you don't know about. And you're like, oh, broccoli cheddar, that sounds vegetarian. It's like, no, it's probably made with a beef broth or beef tallow. So you got to be careful with that. But you're going to mess up and it's okay to mess up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the all or nothing attitude is extremely damaging when it comes to a lot of things like this.
100%.
I'm probably on the more extreme end of sticking to it, but I honestly think, and people have said that they're like, oh, they reduce meat. I'm like, that's great. Like, honestly, any little effort you make, I think is great.
Yeah.
The more, the better. But like, if that's whatever you can do and you do that thing, that's awesome. I love to hear that.
Agreed.
You don't have to totally adopt a vegan diet to have the kind of impact that you might want to have. And I think just reduce a little bit, choose
That's
alternatives. That's it.
Yeah, nice and easy. Nice and easy.
All right. Speaking of alternatives, we have an alternative to good content, which is bad content in the form of advertisement.
Ta-da!
Let's wrap this up with a few interesting tidbits here. Many people may have heard this, but I always think it's fun to share, is that India has the lowest rate of meat consumption in the world, with about 400 million people identifying as vegetarian.
That's more people than are in the United States.
I think between China and India, that's a third of the entire planet's population of human beings.
Yes.
I think.
It's a lot. A lot of people.
Yeah.
Israel has the highest percentage of vegans, with about 5.2% of their total population practicing veganism and identifying as vegan.
I would have never guessed that. Never in a million years.
No, not at all.
The majority of Eritrean and Ethiopian food is plant-based. This I did know. There's a Ethiopian restaurant where I live. Go in there, you basically have to make no modifications to make it vegan. Everything is just plants.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's really great. Jamaican Ital food. Ital comes from the word vital in Rastafarian.
Oh, okay.
It's based on Rastafari traditions and usually includes foods that are organic, unprocessed, and free of additives, and a lot of vegan food options. So, as a matter of fact, one of the only Jamaican restaurants that's in my town is a vegan restaurant called Kale Cafe, and it's so good.
Ooh, I would love to check that out.
Come with me. I'll bring you. Get some jerk mushrooms.
The Jamaican spices, like jerk spices that they use, are so good. Mm-hmm. They know how to use them. They know how to throw some spices together.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. I have a stat here, couched in caveats. So a vegan diet can reduce your carbon footprint by about 73%. Some ways it can be higher, many ways it can be lower. I think the important thing to consider is how you go about doing it. I think a lot of the alternatives end up being a higher carbon footprint than simply eating produce. Be that things like synthetics like pleather,
yeah,
or things like fake meat products. They're almost always much, much lower than meat themselves. But it just depends. As I said, if you're flying your salad in from like the other side of the world for your meal every day, then your carbon footprint's going to be extremely high.
Right.
Eating local can, in many situations, it might be less environmentally damaging to eat locally raised beef than it would be to eat some exotic products that were harvested and flown in from all over the world,
right,
for a particular meal. So just consider like those things. But that being said, you could theoretically sort of weigh it out that way.
Right. Another stat that comes up I've heard a few times, but again, is couched in some, there's an asterisk here, is that every vegan saves about 100 animals a year by not eating meat compared to somebody who does. Now, it's where that number comes from, how they calculate that is a little bit challenging. I think they're basing it on like general meat consumption in the United States, but that's something that has come up quite a few times.
Yeah. Something not to rain on everybody's parade, but not all alcohol is vegan. Some products are filtered through isinglass, which is fish bladder, gelatin, egg whites, or milk proteins. In some cases with wines, also charred bones.
Yep.
I've heard that blood and other visceral tissue might make it in there. And in addition to that, again, just ruining your day, sugar, particularly white sugar, may not be vegan because some processes for refining sugar include the use of charred cow bones or other animal bones.
Yeah, so hate to bum everybody out. And you might not care, and that's fine. Like, we're not trying to convert you, but we just want you to know why people do this thing.
Yeah. I will say for myself, I don't think the whole world needs to be vegan. I don't even think everybody needs to be primarily vegan. I think the biggest problem is people eat way more meat than they need to in places where they have abundant access to other food types. When we're talking about food deserts, there are many places in the world where if they tried to cut out meat altogether and other animal products, they would starve to death because they don't have access to other foods. And so like we can't ask or expect that the world become vegan. That's not a reasonable place for us to be. But we could severely reduce the amount of meat and other animal products that we consume to help impact, I think, both food security, because as I said, we're using an enormous amount of land to support these animals, that if we use that same land to support people, it would be much easier to reduce food insecurity because we'd be growing crops that would directly feed people rather than 90% of the calories from those crops going to making a single, basically feeding one person.
Right.
Because, it'd be like 90% of that goes to a pound of meat or something like that. So anyway, as I said, I'm of the mind that it's not all or nothing. I'm also of the mind that it doesn't make sense to expect that the whole world needs to be vegan. And I think there are very healthy and economic and sustainable ways that people can eat diets that include animal products. And I think that it makes the most sense to just figure out how we can best move forward knowing that. How can we reduce so that we're not using an enormous excess beyond what we need? And how can we do it sustainably so that where we do have those things, we're practicing it in a responsible way? That's my thought.
100%. I agree. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Sweet. So anyway, that's veganism. I think we sort of rounded out, it's something that it's important to me. I think I've been a lot more sort of preachy, fire and brimstone, gung-ho in the past, but like I said, not so much. I think I was a little less flexible about how I saw other people's participation and whether they called themselves vegan or not than I used to be. But I think I've sort of just grown up around that. And I always hated this PETA message of fear and anger and hatred and like
it's bad.
Yeah, this like good riddance getting bitten by a shark. Like, what the hell is that? Like, no, we should never celebrate the suffering of other humans, particularly in instances like that.
PETA is ridiculous.
They are ridiculous.
Just so everybody here is aware, most vegans think that PETA is ridiculous.
Yeah, not on board with that messaging at all.
They're the Westboro Baptist Church of vegans.
That is such a good analogy. Wow. Never thought about that, but that's really good.
It's really what it is. So, yeah. But they're also litigious. So, we don't have lawyers. Don't sue us.
Don't tell them that. They can't know that we don't have lawyers.
Well, we'll get one. What a pain in the ass.
Anyway, I think that's all we have for this until we get some recommendations. You ready for recommendations?
Let's do it.
Perfect. And actually, before we do that, we always need to shout out our acknowledgments really quick, which is that if you liked what you heard today and would like to support us, thank you. I'm a little bit surprised, but that's great. You can like and subscribe, follow, leave a rating and review, all the things that you do on podcasts. Pick up some merch at our merch store. Join us on Patreon if you do get all kinds of bonus things like early episodes, ad-free episodes, and that sort of thing. We're really looking to grow that community as much as we can. We have a cool Discord server. People can talk to each other. They can argue with us. If we get enough people, we'll start hanging out with y'all virtually because we'd like to sort of celebrate the growth in our community. So consider coming over and joining us on Patreon to get those things. The people who have already made that leap, this amazing group of humans that makes it possible for us to do the things that we like to do, includes Mike M, Megan, Layla, Mike T, Justin, Kim, Joshua, Brad, Stephanie, Olivia, Brian, and Ashley. Thank you so much. Thank you also to my team of people without whom I could not do this show. Thank you to Justin for his music and editing, Shane, writing, fact-checking, and in particular, your work on today's episode. And of course, thank you to Emma Wilson as our social media coordinator who helps us stay present on the World Wide Web.
Yes, that ever-growing internet place.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Now I think I'm ready for recommendations.
Let's do it. Recommendations.
I am recommending a beverage. It is called Liquid Death.
Yes.
It is a sparkling water. They can be a bit pricey, but I found them for very reasonable prices as well. They use really good food puns in some of their flavor titles. Like they have Severed Lime and Rest in Peach and Armless Palmer. And so they're just meant to be funny and kind of silly, but they're really large for sparkling water cans, which I find necessary because I go through a lot of sparkling water cans. Yeah. And so anyway, if you enjoy that nice sparkling water mouth feel, I would recommend checking out Liquid Death. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's a good product. I like it. Speaking of, because it's fun because it's like run by metalheads. Like it's very clearly like people who appreciate like alternative music, and I really like that. So
right.
Speaking of alternative music, I recommend a new album that just came out by a band called Ringworm. Have you ever listened to Ringworm?
I've never listened to Ringworm.
Ringworm might be the maddest band that has ever existed.
Okay.
They used to be a hardcore band. They turned into like kind of more of a thrash metal band, and their new record is called Seeing Through Fire. And specifically, I recommend the songs No Solace, No Quarter, No Mercy as one song, or Death Hoax. Both very good songs. The singer's name is Human Furnace.
Birth name?
I think his full name, his Christian birth name is Oh, you'd be so mad if I said that. His name is something different, but it's obviously a Human Furnace. He sounds like a Human Furnace. That's exactly what he sounds like. He's so mad. Their new record is so good. Cool. It's just a really good like thrash metal record.
Fun.
Hardcore dudes that started writing thrash metal and do it really competently.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, very good. If you would like to tell us about ringworm or liquid death or veganism or anything related to something we talked about in this show, you should definitely reach out to us. You can email us directly at info@wwdpodcast.com or on all the social media platforms. We look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. So please send us your messages. And if we like it, we might even read it on air.
Exactly.
So that could be a thing that happens. And I think that is pretty much all I have. Anything for you, Shane, or anything I forgot before we wrap up?
No, I think that covers it.
Oh, I almost forgot. I should have mentioned this at the top of this. Podcast awards are closing. Go to podcastawards.com. We're under the Skeptics Guide category. You can vote for us for a podcast, People's Choice Award sort of thing. And we'd be very honored. We were honored just to be nominated. So thank you all.
Yes, please go vote.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for recording with me today, Shane. And I think that's it. So this is Abraham.
This is Shane.
We're out.
See ya.
You've been listening to Why We Do What We Do. You can learn more about this and other episodes by going to www.wwdpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you have an awesome day.
All right, but we're actually not a psychology about podcasts. We talk about the things that, as we said, we talk about the things that people do.
Hold on. Did you say? Yeah. Hold on. You said we're not a psychology about podcasts.